Alrighty guys, so here we are, finally together to start rattling off some of these stories I've had for over the years.
Yeah.
Carl, I think ages ago you were one of those ones that was like, what we got to do, mate, is just get you in a room and podcast these stories.
Yeah, I think you've always talked about like who's going to listen to these or what's the point of these, but the big thing is that this is the ultimate medium for these stories. It just you unadulterated in a room, just telling them, nothing to get in the way, nothing to land them down, water them down, just your voice.
Yeah, if it's trash, let's do it. Because I've just got trash.
You're trash central. Do you feel like you should give a little bit of a backstory to people that don't know you or don't know you well? How you would describe the situations? I know they're all different, but the things you get yourself into, because you are a unique breed. Like you do stuff. I've witnessed it, and I go, how did this happen? How did we get to where we are now?
Yeah, I think what it is firstly, there was a run of bad luck where I just had these instances of like crazy things happening and people were saying, why do these things keep happening to you?
Yeah.
And I was like, I just got to write them down. And then once that bad luck started turning funny, I ended up embracing it. And then I started being like, okay, if this bad luck is actually funny and people like to hear about crazy stories that I've got, well, I'm going to keep putting myself in those situations.
Just lean into it.
I fully lent into it. And then Curb Your Enthusiasm came out, obviously a huge reference for me. And Larry David, he lives and breathes the same air as me, I feel. Like we share the same space.
That's definitely the way I would describe the way you live your life. There's this... I think certainly these things happen, but I think what would happen is like you would see a situation occurring in front of you. Most people see this happen and they go, I'm just going to walk away, or I'm going to remove myself, or I'm going to keep my eyes to the ground. Whereas you, without even thinking, kind of insert yourself in that situation. You go, well, I'm not going to just stand by while this takes place. And then because of that, I think you then keep finding yourself in more and more of those.
100%. So what will happen is if there's a fight at a pub and everyone's like, come on, let's just go somewhere else. I'm like, no, we need to stay.
Yeah.
Like, so I do embrace the drama of an episode or whatever's happening.
Yeah.
And then I also write them down. So like, I'm sure people will listen to these stories and go, hey, crazy things happen to me too. And it's like, well, yeah, write them down. Like, just add to your collection, because I've got 83 stories sitting here.
Yeah, this is the other thing about you that people, I think most people that know this, but people that don't might not, is you're a stats man. Like, so not only have you got these stories which are just insane and ludicrous, but then there's like a record, like a permanent record of them. And he's not kidding. He's got two A4 pages, double-sided, printed in front of him, and they're all numbered. like literally every story has a number attached to it.
I was even tempted to go through each story that I've got here to tell everybody and rate them out of 100. Like, I was going to be like, all right, the video store story, the girl who runs into the video store, that's a 81.
You should get your audience to rate them.
Yeah, that's
and if they all come back 6 out of 100, you'll know where it's at. You'll know that the life you think you lead, which this exciting life, is not.
We'll pretend the recording didn't record. And
that's all right.
Be like, oh, we only had one episode. So the idea here is that I share with you these 83 stories over a series of episodes on this podcast, and we will try and release them as frequently as possible. And I would like for you guys to share them with your friends too, because it's one of those word of mouth things. I want for you to enjoy the laughs that I'm going to give you, hopefully, but also, share them around as much as you can.
I like that at the gate, you haven't even done a story yet, and you're already promoting it.
Yeah.
That's a true businessman. Shrewd.
That's that thing. Well, I mean, like, you've seen me and how I always promote everything I do. I always try and brag about what I'm doing. It's actually a bit sickening. There's a story about self-promotion in here.
Can't wait.
Yeah, it'll come up.
Yeah. So, do you want to? How do you want to kick it off? What do you think is a nice introductory story to really quick before we get started. So that's Jai's story, and then me. I'm literally a brick wall here. I'm literally a sounding board. I'm meant to be your eyes, and I'll prompt Jai if there's anything I feel like I don't understand about the stories. But I'm not the star of the show. This is the Jai wagon, and I happen to have equipment.
There is that. Yeah, you are a bit of a pod king. So, all right, that being the case, Karl, you do have your amazing stories that we share throughout the year. So they will come up throughout the episodes whenever you feel necessary.
If the occasion calls for it, I'm always here.
Yep. But yeah, putting simply, I also am very wary of how I may come across in these stories. It's like if
Bad.
you meet someone, if you meet someone for the first time and they are really drunk, your first impressions are going to be not so great.
The guy that's always drunk.
Yep, and so these stories do not paint me in a positive light, and they don't reflect how I am as an everyman. Okay, so I think I treat people right. I think I am a respectable sort of role model. I've got my 2 kids, and I think that I wouldn't want them to listen to these stories years from now and think, what the hell, and just have some realization about their father. These are exclusively like singular moments where I might not be at my best, okay?
I think also, though, what's going to come across, what maybe you're not aware of, is that in the stories, for the most part, I think you're always coming across as someone that's trying to do the right thing, or your version of the right thing.
That is true.
You know, you're not out to belittle people, or...
No.
Yeah, so I don't think you have anything to be worried about.
Okay. Now, majority of these are completely 100% true. The only times that they're embellished are in the instance where I might sort of add a line or two. Okay, they aren't fully embellished. They are true, and I have borrowed 1 or 2 from some friends. So
wait up. So you've got stories in there from friends that you're going to tell from your perspective.
No, not from my perspective, but so there's one here about a young boy learning to count, and I could relate to that story with my son learning to count.
You
So
can,
yeah.
You can keep. I'll allow it.
Yeah, you're allowed. Yeah, you can be the judge. Alrighty, I might roll straight into the first story. You want to do it?
Sorry,
we've got it. We're drinking bourbons at the moment, and it's like 10:30, and that was the biggest gulp I've ever seen a man take. You've got like none left for the rest of the show.
I know. I did give the thumbs up though, which is the radio sign. Fucking keep going and don't draw attention to me.
I was just like watching you scull that thing and just like completely just waiting. All right, so the first story is I do teach film and TV as well as make movies. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so I was teaching my film and TV class. Thankfully, it was a year 12 class. And I'm a massive, massive Edward Norton fan.
Yeah.
Like, unbelievably so. It's worrying how much of a fan I am about...
Let's for a moment assume someone doesn't know who Edward Norton is. How do you describe Edward Norton?
So Edward Norton is a major Hollywood actor that maybe isn't recognised as widely as he should be. And he's in some amazing films that have basically shaped my view on modern filmmaking. And I just love him. He's an actor. You would have seen him in Fight Club, American History X, Primal Fear, 25th Hour, Down in the Valley, The Score, Death to Smoochie, Red Dragon, Italian Job, Painted Veil, The Illusionist.
Is he a character actor? Is that what you describe it?
Okay, yeah, he's a chameleon. Yeah, and a method actor too.
He's method.
Method.
He can be... I think I wouldn't say, I know if it's notorious, but he is known to be a little bit harder to deal with.
Yeah, I'm terrified. The day I meet him, I will, be very concerned. And he had a new movie coming out. It was called The Bourne Legacy.
Yeah.
And he's the bad guy that's chasing after the Jeremy Renner character, basically the Bourne replacement in the movie. So he's the bad guy in the Bourne Legacy. And so I was in the midst of teaching a lesson. The bell's about to go, and I'm realizing that I get to go and watch this new Edward Norton movie. And I always go to see an Edward Norton movie on my own the first time I watch it.
Yeah.
I don't like to be around anybody at all, and then I'll go and watch it 2 or 3 more times. And so here I am at work going, yes, I cannot wait to go and watch this movie. And so I've said to the class, yes. And they're all like, what's up? And I was like, I cannot wait to go home and watch Bourne. And they thought I said, I can't wait to go home and watch porn. Yeah. And so you've got this class of just shocked people just staring at me like I'm some sort of freak who's having a mental breakdown.
And you're excited. You're
frothy. I'm really raging. And so I'm like, I cannot wait to go home and watch porn. And they're like, oh, gee, why would you tell us that? And I was like, well, what's the big deal? Like, it's popular. Like, everyone's going to go and watch it. Like, everyone ends up seeing this stuff. And they're like, well, not everyone watches it. And I was like, well, most people do. It's like going to be pretty big hit. And they're all kind of like, what's he talking about? Why is he talking about porn randomly? And I'm completely oblivious to this. And one guy down the front, his name's Adam. He's like, yeah, but sir, you seem really keen for it. And I was like, well, my favorite guy's in it. And so there's this massive miscommunication going on. And they're all like, oh, gee, I didn't know that was, the way you floated your boat. And
wait,
I was like,
you could like my favorite guy. You could have you'd be like, James Dean. That's a porn star. I'd be like, he's my favorite guy. I just like seeing him crushing pussy. Doesn't mean I'm that way inclined.
So the class is terrified at this point in time because they're thinking, okay, we've got this teacher that's talking about porn. He wants to go.
He's coming out of the closet in front of us.
He's coming out. And so I was like, okay, yeah, no, but the main reason I want to see it is because he's going to be on the main guy's tail the whole time. And they're just like, what? Why is he going into this detail? And I'm like, why are you so mortified? And yeah, so these 17-year-olds are just like, so it's not every day that a teacher will say that he wants to watch gay porn where his favorite guy's mounting someone else. And I was like, no, what are you talking about? That's not what I'm saying. I'm going to go and watch the Bourne Legacy, where Edward Norton's going to be chasing after Jeremy Renner. And they're like, oh, like there's this massive miscommunication. Yeah, and a lot of these stories deal in miscommunication like that.
How? Like, I feel like that gets people in trouble. Like, as a teacher,
yeah,
there are teachers that, like, even though it was completely innocent, there are teachers that can't talk their way out of that once it's happened.
There's another one like that. So teaching film and TV, there's editing.
Yeah, and
so what happens is students will sometimes edit, and their timelines, which is its edit space, can get really messy.
Yeah,
and I was like, commenting on this girl's neat timeline. She was controlling her footage very well. And while I'm talking to the student about her timeline, she's paused on a moment where there's a student on a bed and she's rolling over, and her legs are somewhat, spread in a way because she's moving. She was studying.
Motion.
Yeah, she's in motion. So she's studying a book on her stomach, and then she's rolled over to get off the bed. So her legs are kind of in a precarious situation. But I hadn't really even observed that.
Yep.
I was looking at the timeline. And as I'm talking about this awesome timeline, the deputy principal's walked in behind me, and I'm in the middle of talking to the student, and I'm like, I love that. I absolutely love that. I'm pointing to the screen, and it looks like I'm pointing to the girl.
How tidy that timeline is.
Exactly.
Not how tidy that tush is.
Exactly. And so the deputy principal's like had to say, excuse me, Mr. Hogg, what's going on here? And I'm like, oh, just, Lauren was a student. I'm like, oh, Lauren's just got some excellent editing skills at bay here. And she's like, oh, I thought you were commenting on the screen and what you love. And it wasn't exactly appropriate. And I was like, no, whoa, hang on. Yeah, I've had a look at the screen and gone, oh, geez, no, I don't love that, or I have no feelings toward what we're looking at.
That's even more unfair because you were being as boring as it gets. You were
so
talking
boring.
about a tidy edit space, like
exactly.
The equivalent of naming your files correctly. Having nice folder structure.
Yeah.
And you're just getting blasted.
Yeah, I played Hangman one time, and the word was analysis. And the first 3 letters that the students put up was A, and then L, and then some kid put up N, which didn't help me, obviously.
Yeah.
And so we've got anal up on the board, but they were the first 3 letters, so there wasn't any evidence of the hangman. So, like, how you'll have the line for the rope or whatever, and then the head, and then there was no evidence of hangman.
Yeah.
So I've now just got
anal on the board.
And then again, a teacher's walked in and introduced a new student. And I mean, they could have come in when someone said, if it was analysis, they could have said, come in when there was an S or an I, because you would have seen that it was more of the word.
Yeah.
But she's come in right when there's A and a L on the board. And it's just like, why? Why does this have to happen? Like, why can't it happen before the L or before or after, when there's actually some mistakes and it's evident that I'm playing hangman?
I just can't buy, there's people out there that always talk about coincidence and all these things that happen to them. You're just like, that's bullshit. That's just stuff that happened that you're reading a certain way. But your stuff is fucking hard to argue with.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane.
Students, yes, and the students will always say, they are bear witness. They say it happens. It straight up happens to him. We don't know why it's happening, but they see it. And my wife is the best for it. She is like, she is dumbfounded. So we've been together for 14 years.
Yeah. And
she is like, okay, it's real. You've got some sort of, we need to get one of those shaman, one of those Indian guys.
Yeah,
like,
come clear the curse.
Come and clear the curse, because there is something following me around.
You're like a Skyrim character who didn't put anything into luck. I won't need luck.
Exactly.
You need luck, mate.
-2 in luck.
Yeah.
Yeah. But another one I've got here, they're not all luck-based, okay? Some of them are stupidity-based.
Yeah, you definitely didn't put much into intelligence either.
No. So this story is harkening back to Year 9 maths.
Yeah.
And so we've got 4 of us sitting in maths. I'm going to use fake names because I don't want to encroach anyone. Someone might say, why'd you tell that story? Because they come off kind of ridiculous in it. I'm going to call him Sam.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're sitting in class and we've got 4 of us in a row, and we found maths really easy, so we'd get through the maths work too fast, and the teacher would always be frustrated with the fact that we'd have it done within 12 minutes and just be joking around. And so what happened is we'd invented this game where we would basically get the top of our shirt and we would pull the collar as hard as we could across our neck.
Yeah.
So we were basically choking ourselves.
Applying pressure to your own neck. Yeah.
Applying pressure to our neck. and we were cutting off basically air and circulation. You could breathe, but most of it was that you were getting no blood to your head.
Yeah.
And so the longer you would do it, the more your head would turn blue, purple, and you'd have these massive veins sticking out along your forehead, and you would just be awful to look at. Okay, like your eyes would be bulging, and it's really an awful game to play. But we would do it.
Probably shortening your life as you do it.
Well, we'll get to that. So.
Okay.
We would, all four of us would compete. So we'd say, okay, ready, 3, 2, 1, and we'd all be choking ourselves.
Yeah.
But there was one of our friends, Sam, was just too good. He would always last longest. Okay, think of him as the Johnny Knoxville, like just the guy who would just try and do the most damage.
Yeah.
He would just hold out for the longest, and we just couldn't beat him. And so what I did is I basically invented a great lie just to get him to compete against himself. I had a neighbour, his name was Ben Withers, and I never met him ever. But I knew his name was Ben Withers. I would come to mass.
Wait, did you change Ben Withers' name?
No, Ben Withers is real. Sorry, Ben Withers. This will get me in a bind.
Keep going.
Ben Withers is real. And so Ben Withers was real, and he was about 3 years older than us. And so I would come to school and say, "Hey, Sam, I told Ben Withers about the choking game, and he can go for 5 minutes and 22 seconds.
Why did you need to? Why did it need to be a real person? It could have been anyone.
Yeah.
You still made that a real person. Like, for Sam's sake, it didn't have to. It could have been your cousin. It could have been an imaginary neighbor.
Absolutely.
But
it could
you
have
were
been Kermit the Frog.
Yeah, but it didn't matter. You needed to, like, ground it somehow.
It was that, because I think I might have looked at him and was like, what if he...
That guy can do it.
Yeah, what if he
looks
could
like
be
the
Sam?
top. His neck looks thick.
Exactly. And so I've gone, okay... and so Ben Withers, I was like, whispering too to make it dramatic. I was like, Ben Withers can go for 5 minutes and 22 seconds. And Sam would be like, wow, holy moly. Like, he was blown away by this Ben Withers achievement. And I was like, can you stand for this record, like, being taken from you? And he's like, all right.
Dangerous game.
And so he'd be like, all right, I'm gonna do it. He's like, okay, start timing. And so we're in the middle of class, and so I'm like, okay, go. And so we're just timing. And he's sitting there and he's choking himself out, and he's going for, obviously for 5 minutes, which is like 2 or 3 more minutes than we were used to. I'd made a score that was really hard for him to beat. And he's like shaking, like convulsing as he's like trying to beat this record. And I'm like, 5 minutes, 15, 16, 17. And then once it got to 22, I'm like, 23, the record is yours. And 24. And then he would like let go and be like, and like start like shivering, and he'd just be like so sick. And I'd be like, you are the record holder, Sam. You do not have to worry about that record not being yours anymore. It is yours. And then like 2 or 3 weeks later, I'd be like, Ben Withers. Why? I kept increasing.
You almost killed him.
I kept increasing the score, and by brutal increments too, like by 40.
I retract my statement. You're not a good person.
and so I'd be like, okay. So I'd be like, his record is now 6 minutes 38. And I would just keep increasing this record. So for the next 3 months of maths, Sam would continuously, like, he would, like, and it would also get to a time where he'd be like, it'd be like a Tuesday, and I'd go, Sam, the record has been broken. And he'd be like, I can't do it today. He's like, I need time. Like he would just be freaked out by the prospect.
Yeah.
And then so after probably about 3 months of me shifting the goalposts and just continuously increasing the time that was fake as hell.
Yeah.
It got to be like up around 8 or 9 minutes, and Sam's like, he's like, I'm gonna break it today. I'm not gonna go any further because I can't do it. This is my last. This is it.
Hey, one last run before retirement.
Exactly. And so I'm like, it was so sickening how bad his head looked. It was like, just like magenta purple. The vein in near his temple was like a fat witchetty grub. Like the thickness of it was so fat, and he's choking himself out. I'm like, it's 8 minutes 12, 8 minutes 13. You're gonna do it. And he's like, he's physically so sick. And as he's like like holding himself there, and he's like shaking and convulsing, he's now going all sorts of different colors. He's like, I'm like, you've done it. And he then like goes wobbly, smashes his head on the desk, and falls to the floor and starts like having like an epileptic
Holy
fit.
Shit.
And the teacher's like, what's going on? And we're like, oh, we don't know. We're not sure what's happened. And she's had to call the ambulance, and the ambulance has come and taken Sam away, and he was in hospital for like 3 days.
Holy shit.
Yeah, like near coma, like it was really bad. Like he cut off oxygen to his brain.
He borderline, like that's what happens when you die, I think.
Yeah.
Like when you drown or whatever, you cut off oxygen to your brain.
And so he basically
That, but in
voluntarily
t-shirt form, in t-shirt math class form.
voluntarily
Because a
drowned.
fucking liar.
So that's where the story gets better. So
Oh dear.
So there was assembly one day, and the principal was like, Ben Withers has won Cricketer of the Year. And he's like, Ben Withers, come up, and accept this trophy. And so Ben Withers is walking up on stage at school assembly. And I've looked over at Sam because I'm like, oh, fuck, he's got a face for the name here. And so I've looked at Sam.
Oh yeah, because you couldn't come up with the frog in time.
Exactly. And so I was like, it's coming to bite me in the butt here. And so Sam's like sitting forward, like on his knees, just like on his haunches.
This
like,
is the guy.
Like, this is the guy. This is the fucking champion. And Ben Withers accepted his trophy and walked off. And then at lunchtime, we're sitting there, and Sam was like, he approaches Ben Withers because he's got a face to the name, so he's walked up to him, and I can see this going on. Ben Withers sat kind of somewhat near us, and Sam's walked over there, and obviously he's like, dude, respect. I cannot believe you're so good at the choking game. And Ben Withers is like, what the fuck are you talking about? And so Sam's like, huh? And he's like, the choking game. Like, you can go for 8 minutes, 42 seconds. And Ben was like, you're a fucking idiot. I don't have no idea what you're talking about. Go away. And Sam has slow turned to me like the Exorcist and just looked at me. And I'm like apologizing from 30 meters back going, I'm sorry. It's a big... I've just been fully exposed. And he comes over and he's like, you're not a real friend. And just like didn't sit with us in our group. He just went to another group and we didn't speak for like 2 years.
Look, I'm going to be honest. That was the best move for him. That was like one of those moments in a TV show or a movie where he finally got rid of that toxic person in his life. And you were him. It was horrible. You almost killed him.
Yeah, and the other thing is because there was 4 of us playing the game, the other 2 didn't know. Like so.
Oh, so they thought
Ryan
Ben Withers was
and
real
Josh.
too.
Yeah, they thought the record was real, and like I hadn't even talked to them about Ben Withers. I kept it fully a secret.
So wait up. So he knew that Ben Withers was the thing and that he had to try and beat, but they didn't know. They just knew he kept breaking the record. Is that right?
And they knew that Ben Withers was my neighbour. So they could have, like Sandlot Kids style, Stand By Me style, gone to Ben Withers' house and like queried him on how he's so good at it.
I mean, you only needed like a couple. There's so many different versions of how that story falls apart. Like the fact that it stayed together for so long is amazing.
Well,
I mean, maybe that was just thinning it. Maybe that was just survival of the fittest at work. Because if Sam's this cat that's going to choke himself constantly and never corroborate the story and like just go, hey, wait up. Ben Withers is a person that lives next door to Jai, supposedly. I can go to Jai's house and go next door, or I can just go find where this cat is at school. Like,
the big thing was, though, I had told him that Ben Withers was my neighbour and he was in year 12.
Oh, that's intimidating.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, this year 12 kid, like, year 9 kids don't talk to year 12 kids. So
that's
I think
true.
that was why...
That was a nice barrier.
Yeah, that was why I chose Ben Withers, I think, was because I knew that he was somewhat exclusive but real.
Yeah.
See, that's why I didn't come up with a fake person, because Sam could have gone, who? But I was like, Ben
Are you
Withers...
giving yourself that much credit? Do you think you did that in your mind? Or
I'm
you
trying
think
to
it just happened that you just couldn't think of someone fast enough and you're like, Ben Withers will do?
It was a combo. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely a combo.
Yeah.
Couldn't think of someone fast enough, plus he'll work perfectly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, damn. I wonder what happened to Sam in the end.
Yeah, I got a funny story about Sam, but that's going to be future episodes.
Okay.
Because we end up becoming friends later, and then we go to schoolies together.
Okay.
So the schoolie story will come. But while we're on the school tangent, so that assembly, I have a very funny story about that assembly.
Yeah.
We had a principal who was probably about 60, and he like a fit 60, like he was. He wasn't like an old 60. He was.
You didn't look at him and think that's a grandpa.
No, he didn't have grandpa look. And so, so this is probably the year 2001 where this story happens. So Kurt Cobain, obviously, the tragedy that was Kurt Cobain was early 90s. So
92, I think.
92. And so what's happened is, he for some reason, the graffiti...
Maybe 94. Fuck.
Yeah. The graffiti in the school, for some reason it got cool to etch Kurt Cobain into the...
Yeah, that was at our school too.
Right.
And I was thousands of kilometres from you.
Yeah, it was
That's
happening.
a weird thing.
Everyone was just sketching it everywhere.
Yeah.
Just Kurt Cobain just everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so on the tables you would have these very deep etchings into the wood tables, just Kurt Cobain, everywhere, in the toilets, just everywhere. And so we're on assembly, and the principal's come up and he's like, right, Kurt Cobain, stand up. And we're all sitting around going, what? And he's like, we know about the graffiti. We've had enough of it. Stand up. So, like, as a collective, the whole school's like, does he not know who Kurt Cobain is, obviously? And he's like, I'm willing to wait. And so we're sitting awkwardly on this assembly with 1,500 people. And he's like, Kurt Cobain, stand up. We've had enough, and we're gonna wait until as long as it takes. And then he's like to the teachers, he's like, excuse me, teachers, can you please walk along your classes and find Kurt Cobain? We need to have a conversation. And so the whole school's just like, this dickhead is fully unaware of like who Kurt Cobain is.
Yeah.
And so he's just left to just like somewhat...
That's a flounder.
Yeah, a flounder. Massive, just this awkward silence of like, what? This is like rolling onto that one, another awkward instance like that. A friend of mine, I couldn't really call him, a friend of mine at school had a personal tragedy happen, and it was really sad. And I'd forgotten what it was. 12 years later, we're at an Eminem concert, and we didn't go together. He was, we'd not seen each other for 12 years.
Yeah. And
it was the Eminem concert, and I'm like hanging out with some friends, and I was like, oh wow, that's a guy from school.
Yeah.
And I've gone up to him, and I'm like, yo. And he's like, oh, hey, I remember you. And I'm like, yeah, buddy, how you doing? And he's like, yeah, good. And I was like, man, I haven't seen you in years. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, wait, didn't something happen with your dad? And he's like, yeah, he committed suicide when we were in grade 12.
Brutal.
And I was like, oh, yeah.
That's brutal. The one thing you were like, hey, I know this.
And
like, you had something in common. You could something to clutch onto.
Exactly. And now that's not a laughing matter, but the thing was, I had just associated like that tragedy with him. And so when that happened in year 12, it was massive for us. And I was like, it was at the time I was like, oh God, couldn't imagine this happening to me. And then it's obviously stuck with me. And so it was the only thing that I had as a port of call for us to talk about. But I hadn't remembered. I hadn't clued on.
You'd forgotten. You remembered that it was important to talk about, but forgotten the actual crux of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, for me, it could have been that he would have been like, yeah, my dad was like a tennis champion or something. I couldn't put the dots together.
Yeah. You just knew something about his dad, and that was how you were going to glide through the rest of this conversation.
Yeah. And so all the people that I'm there at the Eminem concert with were just like, oh. And they've just like all backed away slowly. And I'm like, thanks, man. All right, have a good one. And just like, we just walked away. And that's a classic example of my friends going, man, what are you doing? Like, how do you get yourself in these situations? And it's like, I'm not sure. And
that's a rough one. That could happen to anybody.
Yeah.
You actually know this person. I actually can't think of her name, so I don't have to worry about, but you might remember just by the story that I tell. We were on set. We were on, Amargo, and it was at the beach, so we're all potentially getting sunburned if we're not careful. And I just turned to her and said, oh shit, looked at her arm, and it was all really red on one side. And I said, you getting sunburnt? And she said, no, I've got like a massive birthmark down my arm.
I've got a birthmark story like that.
And she had a massive birthmark. And she's like, oh, no, it's a birthmark. And I'm like, oh. Just shuffle back. That's brutal because I was trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, that's the same as me. I have my son, Forrest, 3 years old.
Yeah. And
we were doing face paint. He was doing, there was all this face painting taking place at a Christmas fete.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to do it because he was scared. I don't know. He just was seeing people with their face painted.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, hey, Forrest, let's, get your face painted, buddy. And he's like, no, I don't want to. And I'm like, why? And he's like, it's scary. And I was like, no, it's not scary, dude. Like, don't be worried about it. And he's like, no, it's scary. And I was like, no. Look, everybody's getting their face painted.
Yeah.
Look, this person, look, this person. And I've pointed to someone, and she had like one of those red birthmarks on her face.
The face ones, yeah.
And I'm like, look,
port wine stain, they call it.
Right. And I'm like, she's got it done too. And I'm like pointing at her, and she's like just blinking. And I'm like,
was it a kid or?
No, it was like a lady that was like 25 years old. And she's like blinking at me, and I'm like, oh. Just had like that moment, exactly like your moment with the sunburn.
It's brutal. You chose the right thing. That's this is in the Karl show. When did you down here have Harold come to your school, the giraffe?
Right, yeah, I know
giraffe?
the guy. Yeah.
Yeah, we had that. So we had that up in North Queensland, and everyone's piled into the bus. And because we're such a small town, we actually had like other small towns all come to our school.
Yeah, like an arts council type thing.
Yeah, but it was inside the bus, and Harold the giraffe pops out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like a dental van.
Yeah, like a dental van,
Yeah.
but instead it's got like, here's
Fun.
the human body
Yep.
and like all that stuff. Anyway, so we had all the other schools. So there's a lot of kids that I didn't know there. And so I'm sitting right next to this boy and from Ravenswood, and I was from Charters Towers, like the Big Smoke. I was a pretty big deal. And so they're all sitting around, and Harold always had a sidekick, like an actual person that was like manning the puppet and stuff. And the lady manning the puppet was like, okay, so all the girls put your hands up. And this boy actually puts his hand up. And like, this is a pre-modern age where people could be, you know, you can identify as a boy or a girl. And plus, we're 7. Like, I don't have any reference point for that. And he puts his hand up, and I grabbed his hand without even thinking and reefed it down. And went like, you're not a girl. What are you doing? And he said, yes, I am. And it was a girl. A girl with a bob cut.
Oh.
And then I was stuck for an hour sitting right next to this girl. And then as soon as I looked down, wearing a dress, like the whole thing just happened to have like a little boy bob cut. And we were 7, so like,
And you violently,
that's totally, yeah.
You violently reefed.
Just because it was outlandish. How dare you?
Yeah.
So, you know, look, it happens.
It's
And
great.
okay.
We roll on into that. I was there was 2 girls walking out of the toilets at school as I'm a teacher walking past, and I was, you know, convinced that one of them was a boy, and I was like, you know, they're walking out of the toilets, and I'm like, hey, what's going on here? And I was like, what are you doing? And the girl that looked like a boy was like, what? And I was like, you can't be coming out of these toilets. You need to go to your own toilet.
Yeah.
And she was like, what? I just did. And I'm like, no, don't be smart. And she's like, I'm not. And I'm like,
Why you went real teacher on her?
well, because I thought it was
Sorry, this as a teacher.
I was a teacher, yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, I wasn't a kid at the time.
Sorry. I was like, you're really talking down to these
Just this
fellow
grade 5,
children.
Just this grade 5 kid.
You can't be doing that.
Walking around with a ruler.
Yeah, I was like, well, you're a dog, man.
And no, so I was a teacher at the time. And so, you know, and I'm just roasting this female and just going, you need to be coming out of your own toilet. And yeah, she clarified that she was a female, and I'm like, carry on. Just like walk past like nothing happened. There are so many touch and go subjects, and I've got more of those to come. But I think this is a good turning point. We could maybe sort of wrap up this first episode.
Yeah, you happy with that?
I'm happy with that. There are far more...
I learned some things about you.
Yeah, there are far more crazy circumstances to come. We're going to open up these stories even more in terms of how vulgar they can get.
Yeah.
But I hope you stay tuned and you enjoy.
I like it that you're treating this like a little classroom. This is like what's next for the semester.
Hand your drafts in by the end of the week, please.
Yeah, you got some homework to do, kids.
Thanks.
Thank you.